Hello everyone, JesterGio here. Welcome back to another installment of First Look. In today's video, I wanted to talk about the Knight, a character who has become the talk of the town this past few days. I am joined here by the Material Girl to play around in the public map while I talk about Knight. Knight has been in a lot of discourse recently, mainly due to a lack of communication as to what kind of ability he had. Because of that, there was a lot of people, including myself, who thought Knight was broken and should not come to the live servers the way he was. There was another opinion that was shared, but I think it's best we don't open that can of worms, if I'm being honest. With that said, Knight has become an extremely mixed survivor until he was finally released onto the test server. It was there that a lot of the questions about Knight were finally answered and made people's opinions on him far more tolerable. I've seen this being used to discredit the people who were concerned about Knight upon seeing his abilities rather than waiting for the test server to release. While I do agree that the test server is the best way to gather opinions, it's disingenuous to say there's no merit to the concerns because first impressions are everything. It's just the simple fact that NetEase always hold back info on whether the ability has an item limit or if it's a cooldown ability. Most people assumed his ability was a cooldown ability, which means he would have at any point in the match, no matter how many times he used it. Given how strong these effects can be, it can be understandable why making him have infinite uses of this would be too broken. This has been a problem NetEase has had for a while and I do hope they stop trying to surprise us in the future. While a lot of my opinions on Knight on paper have stayed the same, my opinion on Knight's kit has flipped due to the reveal of his ability having an item limit. This really is just a case of players worrying about the game's health and not wanting, truly broken, characters being added into the game. So please be respectful towards people who have shown concerns. The same goes to the other side respecting people who said wait until the test server. Everyone has the game's health in mind at the end of the day. Anyways, with that preamble out of the way, let's say we finally start talking about the Knight now, shall we? As usual, I will be breaking down his ability and traits for you all before we take a deep dive into all of them. Knight is a rescue type survivor, who has a helmet that he can use 3 times per match, with a 10-second cooldown after each use. When selecting your helmet within 13 meters of the hunter, you have the ability to predict up to 2 of the hunter's actions the hunter will make within 4 seconds. After selecting your first prediction, you will only have 8 seconds before selecting your next prediction or you'll lose the chance to predict again. If you have 2 predictions made, the first prediction you make will affect the hunter first before your second prediction will. The 3 actions you can predict is Knight or attack, ability, and stalemate. If you predict the hunter will attack you and the guess is correct, the hunter will automatically be stunned when they try to use their attack. If you predict the hunter will use their ability and the guess is correct, the hunter will be automatically silenced for 6 seconds. This prediction is not affected by recalling abilities, charging abilities, control switching, and cancelling abilities. Finally, stalemate will only appear when you predict a second time, so you cannot have it as your first prediction at any time. If you predict stalemate and the hunter doesn't do anything after 8 seconds, the fear the Knight will take from taking damage is reduced in half for 4 seconds. Only, this is actually a fucking lie. When they say fear is reduced in half, what they actually mean is Knight will lose 0.5 less fear from hits. This means Joseph can still down Knight in 2 hits still because he does 1.5 damage. On the opposite side of the spectrum, if you tank a chip hit while under the effects of stalemate, you will take no damage from the attack. Despite taking no damage, though, hunters will still gain presence from landing their chip hit onto Knight. If the hunter does not perform the action Knight guesses, nothing will happen and they will move on to their next prediction. If the hunter does not perform the second action you guess, once again, nothing will happen and your ability will go on cooldown. If you get a prediction correct, on top of the effect that applies to the hunter, you will gain a 40% speed boost for 1.5 seconds. Knight can also use his predictions to support teammates, however the time is reduced from 8 seconds to 5 seconds and the effects of attack and ability predictor weaken. It should also be noted that the hunter can tell whenever the Knight is trying to predict their actions, as a ring will appear below their feet and up to 2 prediction scrolls will appear. Whenever Knight is trying to rescue, any hunter predictions he had will automatically be cancelled. Next is Chivalrous Sympathy, a rescue ability which will also cancel any predictions made upon use. Additionally, you can get terror shocked when getting hit while using Chivalrous Sympathy, so do keep that in mind. When within 8 meters of a chaired survivor, the knight can use this ability to rescue a survivor from the rocket chair without needing to reach the chair. It should be noted that there cannot be any obstacles or terrain in the way in order to use chivalrous sympathy. This includes both Goatman cages and Mad Eye's walls, however using the ability before being blocked will not stop the ability from rescuing the survivor. Chivalrous sympathy can be used as many times as you'd like in the match, however there is a special effect that occurs when you rescue someone with it for the first time. If you successfully rescue with chivalrous sympathy for the first time in a match, both you and the rescued teammate will gain the stalemate effect for 8 seconds. Once again, this just means the survivor will take 0.5 less damage from the incoming attack, so this'll completely protect them from chip damage and they will still go down to Joseph hits. This ability can be used on both rocket chairs and survivors trapped in Violetta's cocoon. Finally, Knight has the All Thumbs debuff, Shocker, which reduces his decoding speed by 15%. That about covers everything that is in Knight's kit, and to say there's a lot to unpack is an understatement. I guess to get some of my more personal feelings out of the way, I don't really like the Knight's kit on paper because it feels like a culmination of every problem with the survivor meta. While Knight's kit does require you to guess correctly in order to get the benefits of his ability, it doesn't really change the fact that Knight essentially has every strong thing a lot of the meta survivors have combined into one. Due to the fact that he has a silence, a stun, a speed boost, and a tanking ability in his item. It makes it so Knight can hypothetically counter every single hunter in this game at any given situation. Due to this variety, this makes Knight an almost universal counter towards every hunter in this game, which is extremely unhealthy for the game. I understand that the appeal is Knight won't be able to guess correctly all the time, but it feels like Knight's guessing aspect is deceptively hard. When you know what hunter you are up against, it becomes extremely easy to understand what predictions you should do in any given situation. You're against a bloody queen and she mirrors on top of you. Predict attack to force her to swap places with mirror. Going against an opera, use the ability prediction to force her to let you gain distance. You can try, as hunter, purposely do the opposite of what the knight is predicting and waste his ability by doing so. However, not only are there certain hunters who won't be able to do such things, such as Ripper or Ithaca at presence 0, but it is still a 50-50 as to whatever the knight chooses. Like the BQ example I mentioned, you could just use the mirror swap if he used attack predict to deal with it, but now mirror got wasted and you have to wait 28 seconds to use mirror again. Sure, you can just swing as opera to remove the ability predicts, but that's still distance you lose out on against Knight, distance that could allow Knight to make it to a pallet or window. That's also ignoring the fact that Knight might just pick the opposite effect, stunning opera or forcing BQ to lose mirror when she tries to swap. You never know what Knight will do and he has a plethora of ways to mind game and counter you. Finally, you can't even just wait out the time, as he can potentially use stalemate and get a free tank hit for 4 seconds. Knight's kit may not be strong like a lot of characters in this game, since there are obvious things done to make his versatility weaker. His speed boost is only 40% for 1.5 seconds, his stun cannot balloon rescue, and his tanking ability is not as effective compared to the other tanking abilities in this game. With that said, his kit just has everything to make him a universal counter for the hunters in this game, and if he were a cooldown survivor and not an item character, he would have been one of the strongest survivors in this game by far. With all that said, all that bias gotten out of the way, what are my objective thoughts in Knight and how he stacks up in the meta? Well, while I don't like the Knight's kit on paper from how bloated it is, I actually do really like the Knight's kit in execution. Knight still universally counters most of the hunter roster from his ability alone, which can make him an extremely frustrating survivor to try and chase. However, Knight having only 3 helmet uses to work with makes it so Knight isn't pushed to extremes, similar to other survivors like Priestess or Seer. This makes sense seeing as Knight is a rescuer, he requires a lot more survivability tools in order to ensure the hunter is less likely to chase him. It's a problem that court and journalists suffer from and is the reason why they are played more so as containers rather than rescuers. Knight has enough survivability to make him not an ideal chase target for the hunter, while also not having too much to make him unfair for the hunter roster to go against. This is why I said I hated the Knight's kit on paper, since it essentially combines every broken aspects about Survivor into one. However, in execution, I think these effects work really well given the limited times you can use them. It can be really fun to predict what the hunter does, and the reward for predicting the hunter is great. Knight has no one way to play him or use his predictions, so it can end up being an engaging mental battle for both sides. I know I said a lot of stuff early that came off as extremely negative when talking about Knight, but that was if it was an infinite item. Because it's not, though, I do think those negatives turn back around into being positives for the Knight. Like I said, Knight needs to have survivability considering he is a rescuer, as to make sure he isn't chased first. Because of that, having so many options to be able to extend your containment time or force the hunter away is huge. That's not all Knight's helmet can be used for, though. Not only can this ability be used for containment, it can also be used for supporting or while going in for the rescue. When supporting teammates, your helmet's duration and effects are much weaker than if you were to use it for containment. With that said, I do think the effects are potent enough to where you can make a lasting impact on that teammate you are helping. In fact, I think Knight is one of the first ever rescuers who has a real way to support teammates and properly extend their containment. Journalist and Cord can also do this, but they can either mess up their opportunities or their supports are one and done. Additionally, you can't really guarantee the hunter won't use their ability or won't be able to hit that teammate with any of their abilities. Knight, however, can keep the hunter at bay with his predict, preventing them from attacking or using their ability. It's not a powerful support like support-heavy survivors, but it can make a difference in your matches. While you can't use the predictions for the actual rescues, they can be extremely helpful when approaching the chair, as they can stop you from getting hit early or shut down a hunter's camping aspect. Speaking of the actual rescue, Knight's chivalrous sympathy ability is also a really good rescue ability. I think a lot of people will highlight the terror shock aspect as a reason it will be bad, but it can be cancelled relatively easily by moving. So you're not in any major danger when you use this ability, and you grant the rescuer a potential free rebound because of the built-in stalemate. Now, I do recommend you rescue normally first if you plan to bring Tide, since Tide Turner will apply on top of chivalrous sympathy. Other than that, this ability is really good for rescues. It can also help in making sure the teammate on chair doesn't die in certain situations as well. I'm sure we've been in that situation where we practically reached the chair, but we're too late to rescue by a nanosecond. Those situations are extremely annoying and can often turn the tide of the match. Since this is an ability he can use multiple times and the range is moderate, you will be able to rescue those survivors without them dying more often. Additionally, this makes Knight an devious backdoor rescuer, as he can quickly get the rescue off while the hunter is distracted without needing to completely reach the chair. This also allows him to prevent double downs, as he won't be next to the rescued survivor in the danger zone. Knight just has a lot of versatility to his kit that I can't help but actually love his design. Not to mention, he is filling in the rescuer role, which is in desperate need of more characters since they added 3 perma-bans to Tunnely. If I were to rank Knight based on his stats, I would rank him along the same level as characters like Aeroplanist, Cheerleader, Puppeteer, and Fire Investigator. He is an extremely strong survivor who I'm sure will be played in both rank and tournaments due to his versatility while not being broken. In my opinion, this should be the direction NetEase goes toward when making meta characters, as it gives the hunter role a bit to breathe while also not completely leaving survivors in the dust. I won't lie by saying this game hasn't leaned towards the hunter's favor this year, because it has. With Warp being added to the game alongside the new additions like Ivy and Goatman, this year has been the most hunter-sided we've seen ever in IDV's history. However, just because this year has been favorable for hunters doesn't necessarily mean the survivor side is struggling. A lot of the recently released survivors saved for Pharaoh Lady have been able to keep up with the meta fairly well and have secured their places as tourney picks or priority picks. Not only that, but we have seen weaker survivors like Postman, Lucky Guy, and even Mechanic get played and put up decent fights. That's not even mentioning the balance changes making characters like Weeping Clown meta alongside the already existing meta survivors still being broken. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think this game is in a pretty good spot right now, and I don't think adding any more broken characters is necessary. With all that said, I think it's about time we start rioting towards NetEase and demand that they just tell us if a survivor is an item character or a cooldown character. This whole hysteria began because nobody knew if he had an item limit or if he could use it an infinite number of times. They should do what they did with Fire Investigator and just be upfront with item limits going forward in the future, as it'll help people understand how strong an item is. With that said, I'm extremely satisfied with the gameplay I've seen as Knight and I can't wait to try him out when he releases. Oh yeah, he has a 15% decoding debuff. If you watched my test server video with Weeping Clown, you'd understand why I didn't really talk about it. Anyways, that about wraps up my thoughts on Knight. I know this video came off more negative than it did positive and I'm sorry for it, but do know I really like Knight's design and kit. I just felt it was necessary to really hammer in why there was so much discourse and why people felt like Knight was gonna be broken from the test server video alone. I'll be back to review either the Knight or Postman depending on if I procrastinate on the Postman video or not, so look forward to that. Until then, thank you so much for watching and I will see all of you next time.